Before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to personally invite you to our Raising Healthy Kids Naturally live webinar coming this Thursday, March 14th at 8 p.m. Central. If you're done being dismissed by doctors and told what to do with no involvement, no education, and no real informed consent, this webinar is for you. Join me and our special guest, Jessica Paulicki, to answer all of your questions and provide you with take-home action steps to shift your family's health to a natural, empowering form of healthcare instead. The link to register is in the show notes and on our socials. We can't wait to see you there. This is your child, your voice, your choice.
So she started in your intense program. She was every day for 2 weeks. And I think that was September. We have not had a single incident since then. She is so easy to live with. And you know what? And her seizures are reduced because of it, because it's taken the stress off her body.
Welcome to the Experience Miracles podcast, where we help parents find hope, answers, and drug-free help to overcome your child's chronic health challenges. I'm your host, Dr. Tony Ebel, and I'll be sharing my experiences as both a dad and a doctor on every episode. I can take the latest science and neurology of healing and break it down in the most simple and relatable way possible. We'll take on the toughest topics and answer your biggest questions through interviews with other amazing parents and leading experts, leaving you with practical action steps that you can take to help your child heal and thrive. It's time to expect and experience miracles. Let's get started. All right, everyone. Welcome again to the Experience Miracles podcast. You know, I suppose I say this to some degree, form, or fashion at the intro of everyone, because we're not bringing in people we don't love and have a serious purpose and a serious impact that come onto this podcast. But today's different. This will probably be my toughest introduction, other than maybe the time we told Oliver's story. The miracle of Oliver's story has everything to do with this woman, Nancy Monica here, who I'll introduce and we're going to dive in with. She is our angel. I've told her this before, and that is not a term that we use lightly. And I know, a lot of times the word you might hear when I say that is advocate, and person who we just went to help get us out of Oliver's storm. But this will be my least bullet pointy introduction ever, because of the emotion that Nancy brings to me as a dad of Oliver with this. And there's a lot of black and white to our story too. But what Nancy did for us is she simply cared enough to listen to the challenge and the storm we were in and pull every freaking lever she could. And thankfully, this woman has fought for her daughter and then for tens of thousands of other kiddos. So she has a lot of levers and has had a lot of levers, especially back when we were in the hospital, for Oliver to get out. And if we hadn't had Nancy's connections, if we hadn't had her knowledge and her experiences and her heart, I just know that we wouldn't have gotten Oliver out of his storm, because we needed someone tougher than us in that moment. We needed someone who had been through it and knew, hey, let's get you the heck out of it. And so now that's chapter 1 to my introduction to Nancy. What's interesting about the time that I met Nancy and even the Oliver story part of it, she didn't think that where we were going with Oliver was where I thought we were going with Oliver, but you still sure as heck wanted to make sure that if he didn't need to be on seizures, so we're talking seizures today. We'll talk about medications today, and not just in a bad way and not just in a good way. We'll talk about everything with them today. But what Nancy was thinking was, one, Tony's crazy. I'll let her tell that part of the story, but his son is going down this road. He's not ready for this, and we need to do all we can to get him ready. So the last thing I'll say in the introduction is I actually met Nancy through an incredible organization. We both served on the board called Options in Advocacy here in our county, which serves kids and families with challenges. So it's the early intervention program. It's a lot of the advocacy programs. And somehow, still don't know how, I was 1 year into practice, 2 years into practice, first chiropractor ever, maybe still last, to be on that board. And I got on that board. I didn't really know what the heck I was doing on that board. I told the story in my other episode, but I just wanted to serve. And so all of a sudden I'm sitting in these board meetings with just medical doctors and people with a wealth of experience and knowledge. And they're looking at me, probably thinking the same thing. How did you get on this board? And so I'm weaving a lot of stuff that we'll pull out and get to this. But Nancy didn't know about neurologically focused chiropractic at all, because the world didn't know about neurologically focused chiropractic at all. And I was still on my journey sorting it out. And so her helping us get Oliver out of his storm, and then her watching, probably in pretty serious disbelief in the beginning, to see the real medical and chiropractic health miracle that Oliver became, got Nancy to go from this guy's crazy to this guy might be onto something. Let's figure it out together. So for 15 years, Oliver's 14, for 14 years, we've been doing everything we can, right, to advocate for families and get this message out here. So that's my introduction to Nancy with my story. But Nancy also has one of my favorite humans on earth is Miss Megan. She's just wired like I am, punchy and sarcastic and goofy and all the things. Oh, yeah. So we'll go there next here, Nancy. Your fourth daughter had a real tough start to life, which took you from, you were not in this world at all. You were in the marketing world, I believe, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I told a little bit of the story there. Let's go to Megan and your start into this epilepsy seizure world. Can you take us back to Megan as a brand new baby and where this began for you?
Absolutely. Megan was born in 1994. And if there's something you should know about 1994, there was no World Wide Web. Yeah. There was no Dr. Google. There was no looking up anything. So when Megan was born, she got an E. coli infection from the fetal monitor that was placed in her head, and she ended up having a stroke at 12 days old. She then began having seizures, and then as she progressed, they called it infantile spasms. Yeah. Well, they never called it seizures anymore. They called it infantile spasms. So there was no web for me to look at to find out what infantile spasms was. So I sent away to the National Institute of Health on the neurological disorders and asked for information on infantile spasms. And I got it in the mail. I got this manila envelope in the mail, and I opened it up, and it, talked about seizures. And I actually called them and said, I'm not looking for information on seizures. Oh, wow. I'm looking for information on infantile spasms. So that's how little I knew about it at the time. So I started going to the library and checking out medical books and reading and finally getting a little bit more understanding on epilepsy. Megan had some excellent doctors over the years, but whatever her pediatricians told me to do, I was doing it and I was believing it and I was jumping in head first into everything. And I realized after a while that there are different levels of care. There are different levels of hospital care. There's different levels of medications. And I started learning so much about that. And Megan went from going on the ketogenic diet when she was just 2 years old. And the way that happened was back before HIPAA. I had a catastrophic case manager through Motorola Insurance, and she was located out of Boston. And she and I were talking on the phone one day, and she said, I got this guy I want you to talk to out in California. And I'm thinking, oh, great. And she said, I really think you'd be interested in what he has to say. And, can I have him call you? Well, this guy kept calling me, and my life was upside down. I had 4 kids, and, and Megan was a lot of work. So I can't say I called him back right away. Right. But when I eventually did call him back, he said, I'm gonna mail you something. And I thought, okay, so I got a FedEx package. Back in those days, it wasn't like Amazon and FedEx came every day.
It takes a minute to get there.
I'm like, whoa, FedEx. Yeah. So I open it up, and it's a VHS tape of Dateline. I'm like, what the heck is this? So I, put it in the VCR, and here this guy is with Meryl Streep on Dateline.
Get out. I did not know this.
Yes, and he's film producer. He did Airplane, all those spoof ones. Yeah. Airplane and,
pretty good movie,
Naked
actually.
Gun, 33 and a third.
No way.
All those. Yeah, and so I'm like, and so he called me up, and this time I answered the phone. And he said, I really, really think you need to try this diet. He said, I know it sounds crazy, and he started telling me about it. And so,
what was his story into it, real quick?
Because his son was born with epilepsy, and his son is Charlie Abrams, and the gentleman's Jim Abrams, and you've probably heard of the Charlie Foundation.
I'm on it. Yep, totally.
So Charlie and Megan are about the same age. So I I did it. You know, Jim said, try this. So I did. I tried it. And this was back in the early.
That's way before keto.
This was 1996 because we put her on it on her second birthday.
Okay.
And, you know, because none of the medications were working. We had tried everything. And by this time we had gone to, 3 different epilepsy centers and no one could do anything for her. So she started on this diet and she was seizure free on that diet. And it was wonderful. But the early days of the ketogenic diet, there wasn't keto foods at Costco. I mean, you had to have a dietitian and you had a certain diet. And at that time, they limited their fluids. So she had gotten to the point where her bowels had gone to 9 times the regular size. So they want to do bowel reconstruction.
My goodness.
And after almost 2 years, we decided, we can't trade one thing for another.
Well, and that wouldn't just be the keto diet. That would be the stress on her nervous system, the things.
Yep. She was a mess. She was irritable. Yeah. She was a mess. So we stopped the ketogenic diet at that point. And I remember the newspaper coming out and interviewing us. And my comment was, I can't wait till my daughter can eat French fries. And I was embarrassed because they put that on the front page of the paper.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So, we went off that and then she started on this, this drug and that drug and this drug and that drug. And it just got worse and worse and worse until one day she had a seizure and I was doing a clinic with one of the doctors and she'd had a long grand mal seizure. And he said, okay, increase this drug and increase this drug. So we did it. And she ended up with something called Stevens-Johnson syndrome. She burned from the inside out from these medications. And when I say burned, you read about, you can get a rash with a drug. This is the rash to its extreme, and you can't stop that rash. If you've got the wiring in your system that you're going to go to this extreme, there's nothing a parent
nerves
can
that fire
do.
together, wire together, and in that syndrome, it's the most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she spent several months in a burn unit. We were told she was not going to live.
Yeah.
I remember laying on the bed in the Ronald McDonald House thinking, I'm from Michigan. My family's all, my kids have all been born here. Where do I bury her? Do I bury her in Michigan? Do I bury her here? It is just the things that we went through, and she lived. And, she was in a coma, and they kept saying, talk to her. There's still brain activity. And we kept telling her. Now, at this point, she couldn't talk. She used a talker to talk. And she was 6 years old, and she still used a device to talk. And she could say a couple of words, single words. And we had promised her that if she came through this, we'd get her a Barbie car, one of those And so
you promised her a car too.
We promised her a car too, just like you did.
Back to that.
Yeah. You promised her a car too, and she's still waiting for it.
She sure is.
So when she finally came out of her coma, her first words were, "Me, my Barbie car."
The most Megan thing
She
ever.
definitely got the Barbie car, let me tell you. But after that, she had extreme allergic reactions to medications. So her life has just
harder.
Her life has just, it's been a mess. But I'm going to go on to, after that is when I met Tony. And we were both serving on that board. And I had already been...
Because you had entered, just to pull back just a sec here, buddy, you had, from that journey, knew how hard it was to get the right doctors. You mentioned it earlier. We're going to pull that thread out. There's levels of doctors. You fought and advocated for your daughter. You experienced the difference of them. So then you went to work in that world. And you don't have to expand upon it, but what age was Megan when you started getting into this work?
Actually, when I started getting into the world, Megan was 2.
Okay.
Because by that time, the Epilepsy Foundation had already contacted me.
Okay.
And myself and 2 other mothers started CURE, Citizens United for Research in Epilepsy.
Okay.
CURE to date, now you got to remember, this was just run by parents. To date, CURE has raised over $1 billion.
Why do you think it's gotten so much done? Because it's run by parents. Yeah, absolutely. Game on.
Exactly. So I dove into everything I could dive into. I was spending every month in Washington, D.C., advocating for more funding for research and really, really getting into it because I felt like there was nothing that I could do for my daughter.
Yep.
And when she ended up with that Stevens-Johnson, I actually resigned from CURE shortly after that because I thought, my God, she could die at any time. I need to spend time with my kids, and I want something for here and now, something in my own community for her. So I really started working with Options and Advocacy and the Epilepsy Foundation to try to develop a program here in McHenry County.
Oh, that's okay.
So that people would understand that there is a difference in medical care. You know, I thought the best you could do is pediatric neurologist.
Yeah.
That's not the case. That's not and I have nothing against pediatric neurologists, but they are not board certified in epilepsy. And you need someone who's board certified in epilepsy.
They will throw some darts. And this is not the game you want to just play darts with.
No. And you can really mess things up that way.
Yeah.
So
I did not know. I knew of the national, but I didn't know at that timing of the national, because you went full tilt national cure and everything first. And then you became local. So this is how you got with O&A. This is why you got Dr. Rossi out here and went to this.
Exactly.
So you were a little bit newer into this local advocacy when this is the question I don't want to ask is like, when I showed up, what'd you think of me?
That's the problem is you showed up and I thought, no, this is not the way you treat epilepsy.
Yep.
I'm telling you, you have to have a board certified level 4 epilepsy center. And here's this kid.
Maybe not at level 4 just yet.
Here's this kid showing up. And not only is he showing up, he's on this board with individuals with disabilities. He knows nothing about it. So I have to be honest with you. I was pretty angry.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I think I kind of let you know that with my attitude.
Yeah.
I thought, what in the world are you doing here?
You did not talk to me at the Christmas party. No. Just kidding.
But we did make plans to go have lunch together. And I remember it was in May, and we made plans to go have lunch together. And we were going to talk this through because I really didn't think, I thought you were into something,
totally.
That you didn't belong.
Yeah, 100%.
And then I got a text from you that Oliver was born.
Yeah. And that's where, so, you know, we had not had any opportunity to chat and talk shop and neurology. And the crazy thing about all of this is Nancy's, you know, dead on with so much of this because I hate that word, but like, I was definitely a pioneer in this pediatric chiropractic field for seizures. I remember when I was trying to investigate it medically, the information I was finding, I knew was so incomplete. Nobody was looking at, we're talking about a neurological disorder, and we're only looking at like genetics and DNA and physiology and metabolics and lab work. And I'm like, well, you can't really, you can kind of sort of read the nervous system with blood work, but that's not really the nervous system. The nervous system is it's neurological, it's electrical. So why is no one's hunting this down? And then I had started to, because these families that we served together on that board, I think just by proximity, they were like, it just is how it works. Something else, let's try it. And I knew that. You know that from me from the beginning.
Absolutely.
I was not ever saying anything I didn't know. I was on the investigation hunt at the same time. But then those kids started to get results, right?
Exactly.
All of a sudden, there's kids with Asperger's and epilepsy and these things where irretractable medications had failed. They had gone keto. They had done everything. And we started adjusting them, and they're getting better. And so all of this is coalescing around the time of Oliver's birth. And so the blessing I had was a couple of years of investigation, a couple of years of clinical experience. I hadn't really told anybody about it yet because why should have I? I hadn't put it all the way together, right?
Right.
I think maybe we did after Oliver, we would do a perfect storm workshop and all that, and I'd be able to kind of teach you the science, but we hadn't done that yet. So when you got the call, Oliver's in the hospital, hypoxic brain damage, you know, fast birth, brainstem injury, hypoxic brain damage, ECMO procedure, and they're telling us everything. So I called you, and because I wanted out of that hospital, I wanted a better neurologist, and I wanted him off of phenobarbital.
Right.
So what did you think at first where Oliver was going?
At first, I had such pity for what you were going to be going through because I knew that your life was never going to be what you had intended. I knew in my mind, and I said this to the rest of the board, we have to walk beside him because this is a young guy starting out. He's got great expectations for his practice, and life's going to get really difficult. So I called my friends who were epileptologists, who were board certified epileptologists. And I think the funniest thing is I knew that Oliver was on phenobarb.
Yeah.
And what year was Oliver born?
2009.
Okay, 2009.
Almost a blessing that he was.
Yes. Because my daughter was also on phenobarb when she was born because that's what and she was at the same hospital Oliver was at. Mm-hmm. That's what they put every child on.
Just freaking verbatim.
But since then, between 1994 and 2009, studies came out that showed that phenobarb permanently reduces IQ. And it's not reversible.
Yep.
So they weren't using phenobarb anymore. So when I called...
Not with actual epileptologists.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
When I called the epileptologist that I worked with and told him what was going on, and I said, they put him on phenobarb, and he said, no, Nancy, they don't put anyone on phenobarb anymore. Well, they did. They put him on phenobarb. So
and they would still do it at that hospital for many years.
And I'm sure that I believe they probably still do it now.
I know.
Because that is not an epilepsy center. There is such a thing as a level 4 epilepsy center, which is a credentialed epilepsy center, and that was not one. But my heart was broken because I thought there's nothing that could be done. Because as soon as you say ECMO, there's nothing that can be done to reverse that.
Because the brain damage, in the medical literature, there's nothing that can be done to reverse that, because the hypoxic brain damage so the theory, the thinking, and it's still alive in a lot of medical places, is that once brain cells are damaged, once these nerve cells are damaged with oxidation and these challenges, then they can't be regenerated. They can't be reprogrammed. They can't be reorganized. Well, what I had been studying that whole time is if these specific chiropractic adjustments that remove and reduce subluxation, sympathetic dominance from the brainstem, from birth trauma, if they then not only take down the sympathetics, but they activate the vagus nerve, which they've used vagus nerve stimulators. That was already a thing, right?
My daughter has one.
Yep. So that was kind of one of my access points to start to have some of the epileptologists make sense of what tree I was barking up. So I had then seen, okay, well, we can access the vagus nerve and turn it on. We can open up CSF and oxygen. The beautiful thing, and I've talked to you about this, about being able to adjust Oliver in the hospital while struggling with oxygen. So his life-threatening issue before the brain damage, because he had brain damage that was going to give him epilepsy, he couldn't breathe. He was literally deoxygenated. His SATs would be 81, 78, 82, very low numbers out of 100. You don't want them that low. And I would literally put my hands on him and adjust him while hooked up to the monitor. And within minutes, it would go from 82 to 98, 99. And his blood pressure would go from way too high to right in range. And so while the words that I was using with these other doctors, there was only a few. Here's how it worked. The nurses paid attention. The doctors still dismissed it, despite freaking evidence on the screen. And so I got one more thing I want to share about that story into that you may know and may not know. It's all in that frame of what, so your preparations for my expectations remained what they should have. That's all you knew, right? And so chiropractors and people on my side of the fence, they always get so ticked, like, why would a medical doctor, why would Nancy put such low expectations? What else have they seen? What have we done as a profession to show you anything different? That's what we're doing. So there's that hallway at Lutheran General. Right? With the posters. Yes. Yep. And the boards. And Nancy, I walked and I had served an ONA and I had met some of these families and I had cared for so many of these families. And I'm gonna try and say this just right because it's very emotional and I hope people are hearing me and you're hearing me right. I walked up and down that hallway every day and I saw the stories of these kiddos with their disabilities and with their challenges. And you know how big my heart is to serve and still do today, those families, and help them go to their full potential. But in that moment, for me as a dad, knowing what I wanted as a dad and what I knew as a doctor, I didn't accept a single one of them. They would take us on a tour and they would tell these stories, preparing us to say, this is what life is going to be like with all these challenges. And I looked at them and I looked at Christina and I would look at Oliver and I just said no to that. I don't know how else to describe it. I just said, no, let's just keep going. And the no became a go. And it was my mentors and everybody was chatting with you. And then you got us out of there and I got to talk to Dr. Rossi and Dr. Michael Smith, I think, right?
Right,
And we got him off phenobarbital and I needed him off phenobarbital. So I had a chance. And I guess that's all I can say about that moment in time is I didn't freaking know he was going to be this miracle. There was no way. How would I have known?
No,
right?
I don't think anyone believed that it can happen. But if you look at science, a baby's brain or a child's brain is so pliable and has so much potential where if that happened to someone who was in their 80s, no.
If it happened to someone at
20, even at 20. Yeah. But a baby's brain, but that's not what we were being taught. And that's not what the literature was saying. And I think, you and I talked so many times after that, and you said, you got to get Megan in here. You got to get Megan in here. And I think even up to last year, I would say to you, and Megan had gone in, but even up to last year, I had said to you, Megan's pathways are formed. When you think about seizures, I had one neurologist, I had picked him up at the airport. I remember he was speaking, and he told me this analogy, and I've always stuck with it. You think of a child's brain as a field of grass, beautiful, untouched grass on a beautiful summer day. And that first seizure comes in, and it knocks down a little bit of that grass, but that grass is still there. It can stand back up. Second seizure comes and knocks down a little more. Seizures cause seizures. When seizures continue to come, you've got that pathway built. And it's much tougher to stop those seizures when there's a pathway. That's why with Oliver, he didn't have a pathway.
That was the beautiful blessing.
Yeah,
and I needed
he didn't have a pathway.
And you told me that story on that phone call. And I needed to hear that so that I didn't back off. Because to stop the bad pathways from forming, this is what adjustments do. We have to stop the progression of negative, step one. Then we have to actually go backwards. We have to repair.
Yeah. You got to rake that grass backwards.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the clinical. We're kind of breaking down. We call it the 3 R's. So you have to stop the negative progression. Then you have to go through and you have to repair what's busted up and disorganized inside the nervous system. And then you need to reorganize and you need to plant new grass, right? And water it and fertilize it and let it grow. Well, the coolest thing about Oliver's opportunity, you were telling me this, and then so was Dr. Cody, my mentor on that. And he was saying, like Dr. Cody would tell me on those phone calls, he would say, dude, he was so great. He was like, listen, you moron. He said it in that tone, right? I don't know if he said the word because he was like, he's like, okay. But he's like, if you've helped 19-year-olds with seizures, knowing exactly what you just said about what their brain is going through, if you've gotten them from 6 medications to 2 and 6 medications, whatever the numbers, right? Whatever the improvement we saw, he said, if you saw improvements with them, what do you think is going to happen with Oliver's brain, which is literally 2 days old?
Exactly.
Get to work. And so that gave me the confidence. You, Dr. Rossi, Dr. Smith, Dr. Cody gave me the confidence to do what I knew to do, but you better believe not everybody in there wanted me to do it.
No.
So if I didn't have that conviction and that confidence from my tribe, from you guys as a community, that's why I always say you're the angel, because you were that voice that, even though you didn't know me from Adam yet and know the science, you knew the science of epilepsy enough to say, hey, if what you do is going to work, you better get to work.
Well, exactly. And I'm going to tell you what, you get very emotional when you talk about Oliver. I get emotional hearing about Oliver because I know for a fact that if neurological, pediatric, chiropractic would have been in the hospital when my daughter was born, there would be no problems. She wouldn't have the lingering problems. It would have stopped it because that's when the brain is most pliable. And she missed out on that. And, and I'll jump to now. She's almost 30 years old.
Because at the end of the day, there is still improvement. We're talking about the whole range of improvement. Right. And I'll never stop until every Megan and every Oliver in the NICU has one of us. So we're building a PX. We're getting credentialed.
I could not agree more with that.
We're going through, and we're taking the right steps. It's a long freaking journey to credentialing. Thank goodness for Life University partnering up with us. Our doctors are legit. You go to get a PX doctor, this isn't somebody who says they can help. They're actually trained to do it. And then the next is research, right? And advocacy to that part. Yes. But Megan today is... her challenges spilled over to all the things.
Right. I mean, Megan's had a rough life, and she's 29 years old, almost 30. I can't believe she's going to be 30. And she still has seizures almost every day. Her seizures are no longer grand mal seizures. So I'm trying to teach her, because we need a balance. We can't drug her up so much that she can't function.
There's no quality of life.
And exactly. So it's her quality of life to me right now is more important than anything. So she does still have seizures, but Megan, and if anyone saw Megan or knew Megan, they wouldn't believe me, because this is behind closed doors, and this is the first time I'm saying this in public. Megan has some really aggressive behaviors behind closed doors. And we don't know what it is. She just snaps, and Megan has hit me. Megan has punched me driving the car. Megan has hit my husband. And we can't hit back. And then when Megan does this, and this isn't just once or twice, this is dozens of times, but we don't tell people. We don't tell people this. In fact, when I went to Mayo Clinic this year, they said, we know there's something going on. We know that you have some stressor. And they kept saying to me, are you safe at home? And I finally had to say, no, I'm not. And there's nothing. Time you shared it? It's the first time I shared it. And I said, there's nothing you can do about it. This is my daughter. And I would get very nervous when she would start, and I'd lock the doors in my bedroom. My dogs would freak out because they knew what was coming. And each time Megan would be so remorseful, she would call the police. Now, Megan's 29 years old. Megan is her own guardian. And the police would come and they would say, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" She said, "I punched my mom." Well, she's a 29-year-old, and a 29-year-old cannot punch someone.
And once it's reported.
Right. So then they have to take pictures of me and all the bruises and this sort of thing. So we went through this. So we were living in this private hell. Sorry if I can't say that word.
You certainly can.
We were living this, but
amongst all your own health challenges, your other daughters and their grandkids.
Yep.
And
my other daughters didn't want the grandkids around her because they were afraid. And I understand that. My other daughters are very educated. They know a lot about special needs. One's a speech therapist, one's an OT, and one's a special ed teacher. But they didn't feel safe with their kids being around her. So it was just, we didn't know what to do. So my husband and I just lived in our own little private hell. The police were at our house 2-3 times a week, and we were at a loss. She was accepted into a group home, and then, that's all public information. So once they knew that the police had been there, they said, no, she doesn't fit here. So anyways, I talked to you.
Yeah.
And I finally started.
Spark of that chat. Do you remember
I don't
what
remember.
it was?
You texted me about research.
Yeah, I did.
Yes.
Yeah, totally.
And I didn't.
And then
want
every
to
time I
admit
text
it.
Nat, I send her a question about research or something, and then I immediately am like, "And by the way, you and Megan need to get your butt back into the office. You need to get adjusted." And I didn't know any of this was going on.
No. And then finally, I just said, "Yes." You know what?
Yeah.
Because of my own health, I'm not working anymore.
Yeah.
I can drive her there. I'm going to do this. So she started in your intense program.
Yeah.
She was every day for 2 weeks. Yeah. And I think that was September.
Yeah.
We have not had a single incident since then. She is so easy to live with. And you know what? This and her seizures are reduced because of it, because it's taken the stress off her body. Yeah. And one thing I want to say about seizures, anything, and if you don't have a good doctor, a good level 4 epileptologist who believes in this, turn the other way. Because the one thing I can tell you about seizures is things that you can do to produce seizures is stress. Yeah. And stress is the number one thing that will cause seizures. And by stress, I mean you can have an illness, a fever, anything. It's
physical, it's emotional, it's immunological, it's life. Yes, stress, period.
Yes. So not only are her seizures reduced, but she can live in the real world. I mean, I was so afraid. There was times when the police would be at our house. There was one day when she picked up one of those big glass Yankee candles to throw at my head, and they grabbed her and they pinned her on the floor. And I thought, with all that's going on in this world today, what if my daughter is shot someday because she picks something up and she throws it at a police officer? I mean, I was scared to death, and I went down to the police station. I met with them. I filled out profiles on her because I wanted to protect her as much as I could. But someday I'm not going to be here to protect her. So her getting her chiropractic care has been the greatest thing ever for her, because we now have this wonderful little young adult who is not stressed out, who's not going off the deep end, who does not, hit us. We've not been hit. We've, nothing like that. So I think that what people need to understand is earlier you get in, the better, and I know you guys are pediatrics, so you see a lot of pediatric kids, but the earlier you get in, the better. And I also want to say that kids with autism, and I have a wonderful little grandson with autism who's just doing remarkable.
Yeah, that's where he is now. That might not always. It might not always be an accurate description. I know that's a heck of a. It's not going to be. It's not going to be. I said might, but I didn't mean might.
No, he was at our house on Sunday, and I told my daughter Rianne, it's her little her and Peter's son. Had I not known what his diagnosis was, I would never have ever thought that he had autism.
And that's what it is in the office every single day. If you, like Megan, when you see her joyfully sitting there, she always wears, she wears our gear, right? She wears our swag and loves that. She loves that. We got new, by the way, we have new ones. We got to load her up this week.
She's going to be so excited.
We got a bunch, 2 colors, a Hope Dealer and Expect Miracle shirts in there. And they are the most comfortable shirts in history either.
She wears them everywhere.
Yeah, totally. By the way, parents listening, you can go to Above Down. Actually, I don't even know the website. I should. We'll put it in the show notes, but Above Down Apparel. You can find it on Instagram. But anyways, you get those shirts. And so she comes in and she's joyful and she's bubbly and she loves getting adjusted. And you don't see stress when you see Megan. You see the opposite. And then Artem and all. And the crazy thing about autism. So today, as of recording this one will come out in a few weeks. today our deep dive episode on autism released. So I sat here in this chair. When I say, autism, it's like epilepsy. Yes. I did an hour and 5 minutes talking as fast as I can. And it is a deep dive because I talk about birth trauma and vagus nerve, things that nobody else does. But I need another 110 hours to really get the whole thing, right?
Exactly.
So anyways, that's out. But if you stay at PwC and you hang out, or any PX Doc's office, I shouldn't just keep localizing this. I got to remember that we are literally global as a network now. But you will meet kids. They'll come up and they will talk to you. And when they first came through the door to that practice, they didn't talk to anyone because they were nonverbal. And so these are the stories that people go, no way. You first meet, back to your what the heck are you talking about? But what we're doing on this podcast is we are simultaneously telling the stories because they have the power. Mom and Dad, you need your hope back. You need your inspiration. You need your relatability. I needed to know.
You need your dreams back.
You need your dreams back. Mm-hmm. And that is the first catalyst. That is freaking neurological if there ever was. That's how healing begins, is we say it, hope is where the healing begins. And then you need the answers and the action steps, right? Because that's going to propel us into action to get to this. And so I got to cheat. Oliver, I freaking adjusted him in the ambulance on the way there. You hear the stories of like superhuman strength and like a mom and their car is trapped under their child and they can lift it up. There was 5 firemen there. They wouldn't, all 5 of them together wouldn't have gotten me off of Oliver's nervous system because I was parasympathetic influence, vagus nerve, I've talked to this stuff, right? Neurologically.
Believe you.
And so it just works, and it works at any end of this spectrum. So what I want to do is we're right in the thick of it, and I want to kind of turn it a little bit. So what also works to put fires out when done with a level 4 epileptologist and a brilliance of someone like Dr. Rossi is sometimes you need a freaking life jacket, and sometimes you need the fire department. And so medications, what I don't want people ever to hear on this podcast and this platform where we say hope answers and drug-free help, it's not that drugs don't save lives. They did save Oliver's lives. Hospitals save lives. But the moment in every job and every moment that you can get the job done without drugs, we should go for that first and foremost.
Absolutely.
Because things like this kind of chiropractic and this way of natural care, it actually builds health. So you can get a positive. I always make the joke, like if we had a commercial, you get done with a drug commercial and they're like, your headaches might kind of sort of go away. And
you might have constipation, diarrhea.
Don't wear white pants to work.
Exactly.
And you might die, And so but the gloomy voice comes in and it's like, first it's like sunshine and unicorns, whoever's taking this drug is just miraculously running through a flower-filled forest, right? And then that's like 3 seconds. And then that's like 2 minutes of all the side effects. If we had a commercial, Nancy, when we go to this, it would all be positive. It would just get happier when side effect guy comes on.
Exactly.
Quality of life, sleep through night, all that sort of stuff. So, all right, I'm on one now. But medications, what do seizure families, I know it's a big, broad question. We'll get more granular. What do epilepsy families need to know about getting the right doctor on their team so they get the right medication, which is kind of the same thing as saying make sure they don't get the wrong medication.
Exactly.
So I know generally that's hard to answer because what you guys do is you individually take care of each patient like the best I've ever seen. So it's hard to answer big picture, but give us the scoop on doctors and medications.
Well, what I want to say about doctors and medications is it's so important if your child has seizures. Now, I also want to say we talked a little bit about autism. 30% or 1/3 of individuals with autism
or more.
Yeah. I mean, they used to say 50, but I just read the new statistics said 30. But they also have epilepsy.
Yep.
And epilepsy does not mean you're having a grand mal seizure, that you're shaking, that you're falling to the ground. It may be you're having a certain behavior. And so it's sometimes very difficult to tell what are seizures. So I want to say that because I think that's so important for people to know. There are many different kinds of seizures. But, back in 1994, when my daughter was born, there were 7 medications for epilepsy. And they were mostly the benzodiazepines, the knock you out, the phenobarbs, that sort of thing. There was not a lot of medications. They were the dilantins that make your gums grow over your teeth. They were ones that would affect your walk. Yep. There's now 37 medications for epilepsy on the market. But that being said, the ones who use the newest medications, and the newest medications don't affect the overall body to the extent that the old ones did. Those are the level 4 epilepsy centers. Those are the board certified, I can't say this enough, board certified epileptologists that are using those medications because the other doctors are using what they know and what they've used for years.
That's,
and they're
by
not,
the way,
they're
let me
not,
kind of sneak this in. That's chiropractors too. So the greatest thing about the PX Docs Network is to be on the directory. You didn't just get there 6 years ago. You have to stay training and engage with us.
Exactly.
So there's a continuation of commitment.
That is identical to a good board certified epilepsy.
Yeah, Dr. Rossi I was just chatting with him when he was at his training a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. So, Megan is on seizure medication. She has to be on seizure medication. Seizure medications have their purpose. But just like Tony was saying, if there's something you can do to not need as much seizure medication or possibly not need any seizure medication, like the diets, the low glycemic index, the ketogenic diet, which is much friendlier now than it used to be. If you can do something with those, if you can save that brain and give it a holiday from those medications, you should be doing that first.
Because what we're able to do, so with neurologically focused chiropractic, we're primarily accessing the brain through the motor system. So the brain, 90% of its energy and metabolism, so metabolic energy, not like woo-woo energy, like actual energy, right? I always say that because, some chiropractors, I always make the joke, they stop wearing shoes, stop showering, and just, keep walking, too far down the road. So when people hear energy, they're like, whoa, wait a minute. No, like metabolic energy to the brain, 90% of it, some research shows, is used just with dealing with gravity. So our muscles. So, and I never say muscles on their own, even though I did just there, the neuromuscular system. So that is all organized and attenuated.
Place in space.
And it's huge. So it's huge. And the upper cervical, specifically where birth damage, where brain trauma, where birth trauma and those brainstem injuries to the vagus nerve reside. And so we can access that system. We can stimulate the vagus nerve. We can actually see CSF flow improve. We can actually, there's now functional MRIs. There's all this stuff that we talk about when we get into research. We're seeing functional MRI improvements. We're seeing Oliver's MRI showed brain damage, then he left the hospital without it. Like literal physical proof. His EEGs had seizures, then they didn't. His MRI had brain damage, and then it didn't. That just didn't magically go away. There was inputs designed to create that healing mechanism. And so what happens in these places is when you can add that. That's first. Well, the gut is also connected to the brain. And if the vagus nerve goes down in there and it tells, the vagus nerve has a lot to do. Give it less to do. I love how you just said that. I never thought of this with the vagus nerve. Give the vagus nerve less to do.
Yes.
Give your child's body less to do. You can't put your child with epilepsy, you can't put any of our kids in a bubble. They will need to adapt to stress.
Yes.
There will be there will be mean girls. There will be, these things. And so what we can do is boost their resiliency. So start with neurologically focused chiropractic because it's the most potent access to the vagus nerve and autonomic nervous system. We get into where seizures live more potently than anything else. And I'm not voting against medications, and I'm not voting against supplementation or ketogenic diet.
Well, you have to, just like in medicine, you have to first do no harm.
Yes, ma'am.
So if first do no harm is chiropractic,
Yep.
Absolutely.
Game on.
Because, the ketogenic diet, I mean, it was a lifesaver for 2 years with Megan. She went seizure free. But look at what it did on the other end. So, I mean, you got to look at all this. And the only thing is with chiropractic, it doesn't do any harm on the other end. And that's kind of what I've realized.
You say it, and it's like, so, and people are like, wait a minute, because, don't think of TikTok. We'll have some fun here, right? In this moment of it. We're not talking TikTok chiropractic, all right? We're not talking ring ding or YouTube chiropractic. So some of you have, actually, our favorite new patients are someone who knows nothing about chiropractic, like you. When someone has gone to rack 'em, stack 'em, bill your insurance, hook you up to machines chiropractic, it's actually harder for them to get and this is not your fault, by the way. This is chiropractic's problem, to get an understanding of what we do. And also, I'll sneak this in. Chiropractic for back pain and musculoskeletal and disc issues is way better than freaking surgery.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, totally, right?
There.
Yeah, totally. And so way better than opioids, which are literally costing us, millions of lives in this world. And so that's a good kind of chiropractic. This is just a different kind of chiropractic is where we're going. And so what I love about it is, and when parents, because sometimes dads are, and parents are super analytical and they're like, man, it looks like it would be something that would have damage. I always go to the math. I don't know if I've ever talked to you about this, but you'll love it. So, certain people care nothing about whether chiropractic or medicine or whatever. Those are called insurance companies, okay? And now the other kind, the ones that give us malpractice. So actuary, I don't know if I'm saying it right because I'm not that nerdy. I'm neurologically nerdy, but not mathematically nerdy. So I'm a pediatric chiropractor. Our malpractice insurance is pennies on the dollar compared to medical doctors. And all I go into that long story to tell you is the people who set those rates don't care about, quote unquote, the politics or whatever else you would call it. They are literally just looking at the facts, the data of who's
damage.
safe. Yes.
The damage they're looking at.
And there isn't, the way we adjust, especially neurologically trained, pediatric trained chiropractors, when you watch your child get adjusted, if you're listening to this and this is going to be the spark and the catalyst to get you into one of our PX Docs Network offices, I promise you this, you're going to watch that first adjustment and you're going to go, that's it? This whole podcast and all these videos and all that, and then you just blah, blah, just because
it's over.
Yeah, it's over. The more stressed out a child's nervous system is in the beginning, you actually have to use a lighter force, and that's a whole nother conversation for another day, the specifics of the science. But there is a very deep, intricate science, and so just like Nancy's been saying this whole time, you don't want to trust a regular neurologist with your child with epilepsy. I'll just speak as a dad and a doctor who cares significantly down both of those roads. You don't want to trust any chiropractor with your child with epilepsy. I would just remove the epilepsy label and I would say, just, you don't want to trust it's your child.
I agree 100%.
Wellness checker, right?
Yeah.
Arlem and Milo and everything. Like, I mean,
yeah.
That's a specific specialty that we're seeing.
Oh, definitely.
Let's just sneak that in really quick. So Artem is thriving. Milo's up next.
Yes.
In that video.
Well, Milo is 1.5. Milo is not walking. And I think a lot of the reason Milo isn't walking is, number one, he's Artem's little brother. So he's been carried around, in a
his
seat.
Own perfect storm story, and then this.
Yeah. Yes. So it was really interesting because I think that my daughter and her husband, I thought they were going to think I was crazy. I said to Tony, I said, you know what? My grandson, and I hadn't told anyone this, I believe my grandson has autism, and Tony, of course, said, get him in here.
I'm pretty relentless.
And so I thought about it a lot. I talked to my husband, and I knew that, I didn't know if my daughter and her husband would be on board with it. So I talked to my other daughter. You always go behind their backs. Yeah. So I talked to my oldest daughter, and I said, "Do you think that Rhiannon and Peter would go for this?" And she goes, "Mom, they have been wanting to. They have been wanting to all along. They've been reading about it. They've been following Dr. Tony. They have been reading about this, and they have been wanting to." So I called him up and said, "Let's do it. Let's do it." So he was in, I think, within a day. Totally. And so the difference in Artem, I can't even tell you the difference in Artem. I mean, it's just like a night and day difference, and it happened so quick. So then she called me up a few weeks ago, and she goes, Mom, I don't know that there's any diagnosis for Milo, but he is behind, and I think he's behind because of Artem. And so she said, Peter and I think we want him to go. And I said, then do it. Yep. No better time than when he's so little like this. So within 2 weeks, he's only been going for 2 weeks. Now, you got to remember, Milo was just like sitting and crawling a little bit. Yeah. She sent me a video last week of Milo walking up the stairs. Yeah.
Yeah,
so we'll put it on. Just unbelievable.
So here's what's cool, because you did this, because I shared this idea with you, and it's going to come, and you got it into. So we had this dream and this vision of making documentaries with our perfect storm patients, right? Where we would go in with we're sitting here in our beautiful studio. God has granted us this equipment, so now we have these other ideas to do it. And so the idea is to go into the home before we start and get a baseline, and get an understanding of these gross motor delays and these meltdowns, and even in cases of seizures, and document it, and then document their journey and getting started. I knew exactly what Artem scans were going to look like. I knew exactly what Milo scans. I knew exactly where his subluxations. There's a clinical science to this, and I probably got more experience than anybody out there in our team, and that. And so we just knew, that these changes are going to happen, and so documenting. So when that video came of him climbing the stairs, and the coolest thing was actually the words. The mom and dad being like, "What? Look at this!
Look at you! What are you doing?" Yeah. It's the excitement. I just think that so often we don't know what other families are going through behind closed doors, and the worries that those parents have, and just like I was out in the public a lot with my job, so I didn't want people to know what I was living with at home. So it's tough to show everybody that. But if people knew that, we wouldn't all feel so isolated.
Yeah, and you need to know that God just made a certain group of people who they just can't wait to hear that. They can't wait to circle you around in community. Nancy's one of them. I'm one of them. Our tribe is one of them. And actually, let's go there next then as we get kind of towards. So there is advocacy. You have worked in this. if the world didn't already know you were a warrior and a change maker, can you go through your daughter's professions one more time? Did y'all pick that up earlier on that? So what do you have?
So my oldest one is 2 master's degrees. She is a speech language pathologist. She works in the autism program for district. For Palatine, Schaumburg Palatine, the biggest one there.
Yeah.
And
absolute wizard. Brilliant
wizard.
Wizard.
She runs their autism program, and she really helps kids that are in high school that maybe couldn't take the regular track that the rest of them take to the major universities. She gets them hooked up with services so that they can still go to college. Goodness. They can still live on their own, and she does all that. Now, I have to say that's a direct result of her being brought up with a sister like that. Ma'am. My next one is Rianne, who has 2 master's degrees also, and she works with special education. Yeah. So ironically, Rianne taught kids with behavioral disorders and autism before she had her children. Yeah. So Rianne has really, and she just knows IEPs and everything the kids need so much. And then my next one, my third one, she has her doctorate as an occupational therapist, and she works in the high school district in Crystal Lake with kids with amazing. Awesome. So my kids all work in the profession. Yeah.
And parents, that's actually, I'm going to sneak this in. Nancy knows this about me. My relentlessness spreads in all directions. Because look, y'all, all these perfect storm ingredients we're talking about right now, as of this recording, I don't want to say this, but I have to say it. The onslaught of them hasn't stopped.
No.
In fact, the onslaught of stress during pregnancy, birth interventions, toxicity, these things, it continues. So Nancy's daughters, this generation of parents, and then the ones, and now Artem and those families, we have to reverse that tide for sure. But also, because the perfect storm has been brewing, we've been in an actual pandemic with this perfect storm for a generation or two, and it's here. So we need more people to step up and serve. And the way God maps this all out, we've sent 84 of our patients in 15 years off to chiropractic school. Half of them, over half of them as a second career, from the Dr. Matts to all of them. And so I want everybody to hear this. In the journey of getting your child through the storm and to the other side, you will be the best and most equipped guide, doctor, OT, all the above, right? Fill in the blank with it, because there's a quote. This guy is a personal branding speaker. I've heard him speak, and he's amazing. Not in healthcare, but this is very relative to us. Rory Vaden, and he said, you are best equipped to help serve the person you once were. And that's us.
Yes.
That's you. That's the Monica family.
That's a perfect way to say it.
It's why I think of your daughters, and I see what they're doing, and I get to meet them, and I no doubt we'll be working together, right, in all these different connections, and I just see what they've done with it and for it. And that is a testament to, as I told everybody at the beginning of this, that is a testament to your strength, to your toughness, to your tenacity, to your just nonstop moving forward. And parents that are listening out there, Nancy and I would both say, like, whatever you're feeling called to, whether it's volunteer or whether it's a new career, those happen to rhyme. That works out nice for me. That those rhyme, right? Volunteer or new career, choose it. Full freaking tilt. Yeah. Let this podcast be I wasn't going to be a pediatric chiropractor. Do you know how much easier sports injuries is emotionally than epilepsy? My whole clinic.
You could go home and sleep at night.
I could have golfed over lunch. I thought when I was a chiropractor, all these chiropractors, they have like 4-hour lunches. I'm going to be golfing.
You're going to be a pro.
I have clubs, but I got people to serve, so they don't help get kids out of the storm. Yeah.
When we moved here to McHenry County, we had moved from the Schaumburg area. We moved here to McHenry County. I literally thought, when I had this daughter with seizures, I was living on an island. There was nothing here. So, with Dr. Rossi, he helped create this model of care where we wanted everyone to be able to get the care they needed, whether they had insurance or not.
Yeah.
We didn't. We had.
Yeah, give us a scoop on this.
Yeah,
this is incredible because it exists here, and then it needs to be replicated elsewhere. Okay.
Right. We had gotten funding so that no matter what the insurance, or if they had no insurance, we wanted to help these children. So
not just any care, Dr. Rossi.
Dr. Rossi, yes. So we set up this program where the patient was in the middle, and we had OTs, we had nurses, we had mental health doctors, we had epileptologists, we had pharmacologists. And right here, we should have had chiropractic, and we didn't. But we wrapped the services around the patient. Now, since then I have retired, but we have continued this at a much smaller scale through what's called Epilepsy Health Management. My daughter, Rianne, is the director of that. And we have funding if people need help. And we help connect families to these services.
And that's what it takes, that connection.
Yes.
Yeah. And so we're going to put that we're actually going to make a ton of like Instagram reels and other things. So it's going to be on social, but listening to the podcast, it'll definitely be in the show notes as well. And you know what it's like, epilepsy families, to feel like your doctor is not listening or is throwing darts. And if you have that feeling, this is the most impactful podcast you can find, because you then need a doctor who does listen, who does address the root cause, and who knows exactly what they're doing, isn't guessing. And so you need to find those doctors through connections.
Right.
And in this world, but probably more so than any other conversation I can have, right, Nancy? It's like, you need your nervous system focused chiropractor, but these drugs, these seizures, these pathways, they're significant. So you need a really good, for Oliver, I'm a doctor, sure, of my kind. I needed the best epileptologist on his team, and I've always had it, and I fight hard for our patients to have it through this crew. So I'm going to put that link in there and that number in there.
Excellent.
And families, you've got to reach out in both directions. Get to your nervous system focused chiropractor through this platform and through our directory, but get connected to an actual epileptologist, neurologist. And I'm saying that, but really you connect to the whole network, right? Because there's also an OT who knows what they're doing here is different than right? There's specialties within everything.
Absolutely. And even if you think you're going down the right path and you're just having a bad day and you need someone to talk to, give Rianne a call. She can talk to you. She connects people with me. Yeah. We have Dr. Rossi on our board. We have several people on our board. Yeah. I'm going to push Tony to try to be on the board.
I was literally just going to say it's all out there for. I'm coming in guns a-blazing because that thing needs to grow, because this world needs it.
Yeah. So, sometimes you just need someone to talk to.
Dang straight. All right. So my last question for you is, and I know this is a long answer with multiple bullet points, but let's rank the top one or two things. What do we need to do going forward? So, and I'll actually give you, it's kind of like a multiple choice question where one answer is already revealed. So I've been telling you about this plan, this dream forever, and God has now given us all. I've got the team. I've got, we've got the voice through this platform and this podcast. And if you're on this and you haven't gone to the website yet, pxdocs.com, the articles and the research are there. Go nerd out. If you haven't gone to YouTube and watched those videos, or Instagram at pxdocs, go there. So we're going to go find the moms, Nancy. Okay. We're going to go. I had a message just last night. A mom in Miami was listening to this while in the NICU.
Oh my God.
Her child was just diagnosed. And so the first move she's going to make, they're getting discharged on this Friday, and she's literally leaving the hospital to go see one of our PX doctors, one who worked in my office. So, that's what we're doing here. Okay. We have a phrase, every kid counts, and that's what we're going to do. So we'll get that job done to the best of the degree. Other jobs. So we'll build the bridge, moms, to you and dads, and then to the nervous system doctors. But another bridge needs to be built. The medical to chiro bridge, the research bridge. So what's missing? What do we need to do?
There must be pediatric chiropractic in every NICU. Yeah. There has to be. There has to be. And that's not something that
so
is
how do we
there.
get there? What are the and I know we're just throwing this dart out here, but what are the incremental steps? What's the first couple steps that you think need to happen? That world better than anybody.
I think we need to start talking to the American Academy of Neurology, the American Epilepsy Society, because there are these conferences every year where they talk about topics. Chiropractic has to be a part of that.
It's got to get on the panel.
Because ketogenic diet is. Yeah. I mean,
kangaroo care.
All these new brain stimulations, kangaroo care, all these new brain stimulators. It's all a part of it. And they're all very important parts of it. But chiropractic is not there. It has to take precedence if it's possible to not have all these drugs, because seizure drugs have their purpose. And thank God we have them. But there's no kind and friendly seizure drug out there. None.
Even number 34, number 35, number 36, 37 are still not
you
want if you don't have to have them.
Because the purpose of a seizure drug is to stop those brain waves. It doesn't just stop those brain waves. It just slows everything down.
It's like an antibiotic. An antibiotic doesn't know just to go to where, the specific infection is. The antibiotic is all over. And so seizure drug does that neurologically as well. So if you're listening out there So Nancy, we're going to find those. So how does that happen? How do we? So if you have a connection to any of those organizations, to any of those events, to any of those doctors, connect them to this platform. Connect them to me. If there is, you know, and those listening out there too, do it as well. If there is anybody who got, you know, for reasons I sort of know with Oliver, but I don't all the way know why God chose me for this, but I'm ready for this. We are definitely.
You know what? And no matter how many Olivers are out there, it might be 90% of the population of newborns, it might be 10%. Even if it's one Oliver, it makes a difference. So we have to all know that, you know, everyone's journey is going to be different, because with these epilepsies, there's syndromes, there's different things that make a difference. But overall, just like with my daughter Megan, we might not be able to stop her seizures because those seizure pathways are there and they're paved with blacktop, let me tell you. Yep. But we can change things that improve the quality of her life. And that's what we have to do. And it's got to be a part of care.
It does. So what we want to close out here, everybody, is simply this. These are my absolute credos. This is what I live every day with. And I've been in storms. You know, this isn't just like, I don't take this attitude when the sun is shining, you know, and everything is wonderful, but you constantly just move forward. I have this real farmer phrase that my dad taught me, and I just teach to everybody I can, and it's just fix it forward. You know, because it's the only way you can. There isn't any. None of us has Marty McFly and Doc. There's no. Right. There's a, okay. Right. That was it depends on your age. If you get the Back to the Future reference there, right? The DeLorean, and so we can't go backwards and change that. And this podcast isn't about taking you backwards. This podcast is about fixing it forward and improving that quality of life. And the one thing we started with and we're finishing with is the coolest thing about pediatrics and our kids is the potential they have to heal is actually immeasurably bigger than we know it to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. God makes us very resilient.
Very resilient. And that's why and that's why it's crazy that when we look out there, you know, like as we went to make this podcast and make our Instagram and everything else, it was like, okay, you know, anytime you start something new, you're like, hey, who's out there doing this? Nobody.
No,
there's thousands of podcasts about your health, crunchy granola moms and fit and faith-driven dads and all this sort of stuff, right? And there's just nobody having this conversation for our children. And what matters more than them? The answer, nothing. Every one of us, 100%, you know, agreement on that answer. Yep. Nothing matters more than our kids. So moms out there, dads out there, everybody out there.
Grandparents out.
Great point. You know how many intensives are brought to our clinic by their
grandparents?
You do know.
My God, yes.
But so
I think I've talked to them.
Totally. We should start a little coffee meetup.
Exactly.
Let's do that. You guys going to do? So in my hometown, you have coffee at the gas station. You want to go somewhere fancier?
Okay, we're going to go to Casey's.
We take straight. Little taco pizza in there. No, that's not good for you, but it's so good. The truth is, if you're hearing this podcast, it's the only one of its kind. It's about kids and their health and healing from the toughest of storms. And it's the only one that's going to tap into the science and the neurology like this. It's the only one that's going to bring Nancy's to share their story. And the way God made me to be able to teach you the science in a way that is easy to understand, has a little humor and a little sarcasm and a little craziness baked into it. It's just what this podcast is for. So now more than anything, as you finish this one, will you please absolutely subscribe to this sucker? Please leave a review and please share the heck out of the podcast. That's how we fix it forward, pay it forward. That's how we find another Megan. That's how we find another Artem and another Oliver and all the ones that we are here to find. I love you like none other, Nancy. Oh. You are. Oh, I just this one, I think I made it through without crying. I think we did, didn't we?
We did.
Son of a gun. I didn't see that coming.
I think we've been through so much that we can make it now.
We're ready to move forward at all times. Yeah, totally. But everyone, please make sure, we're going to post a bunch of different reels of this on social. Please make sure you share and say hi to Nancy and how much you love her too. And then those links to the epilepsy health management and those connections, make sure you take those connections and share them, if you will. So
and know that with epilepsy health management, there's never any cost to the family. So please know that, it's just, we just want to help you get on the right track.
Okay. Love you. Thank you very much for joining on this one, everybody. So remember, this is your source for hope, answers, and drug-free help. We'll see you on the next one.